This is question 115 of the Summa Theologia, Prima Pars. Thanks for joining me as we journey through the Summa. It has been a long trek so far. I said at the very beginning that there are about 600 questions in the Summa, so we are still a long way to go to the end. But if you are watching all these videos, kudos to you. I hope you're learning a lot, and I hope this is interesting to you, because I certainly find it very fascinating what the really the greatest mind that the Catholic Church has ever produced, what he has to say in his greatest work, which is the Summa Theologia. This particular question has 6 articles, and it's on the action of the corporeal creature, which is, for the most part, talking about what St. Thomas Aquinas refers to as heavenly bodies. These are the things in outer space, like the planets and the moons and what impact they have on us, but he's interested in bodies in general and also what these bodies are able to do, and also whether the heavenly bodies have any impact or influence on what's happening here below. Okay, so that's what he seems to be interested in. The first article is whether a body can be active. Okay, can a body be active on its own? And I'm just going to give you a part of this article because it's actually quite long. He says, it is apparent to the senses that some bodies are active. I mean, bodies are moving, right? But concerning the action of bodies, there have been 3 errors. For some denied action to bodies altogether. Okay, so they denied that there were any actions. He goes into describing a guy named Avicebron, who was influenced by Plato, and I don't really have time to get into all of it, but it has to do with the Platonic forms and the influence that the form has in the body. But again, it would take me a long time to read it all, so let's just suffice to say that he denied, St. Thomas Aquinas denies that one. And then he goes on and says, Plato and Avicenna, remember he's the Muslim philosopher, follow him to a certain extent, and they held that corporeal agents act through their accidental forms by disposing matter for the substantial form, but that the ultimate perfection attained by the introduction of the substantial form is due to an immaterial principle. Okay, so now we're talking about the substantial form, the thing that gives movement to a body, is introduced by an immaterial principle, something like a soul or an angel or something like that. And this is the second opinion concerning the action of bodies, of which we have spoken above when treating of creation. The third opinion is that of Democritus. Now remember, he was a pre-Socratic philosopher, came before Socrates. He was the first atomist, believed that all things were comprised of little atomic particles. He actually was way ahead of his time and is also continues to be very influential today. He held that the action takes place through the issue of atoms from the corporeal agent, while passion consists in the reception of the atoms in the pores of the passive body. This opinion is disproved by Aristotle, for it would follow that a body would not be passive as a whole, and the quantity of the active body would be diminished through its action, which is manifestly untrue, St. Thomas Aquinas says. And then he finally says, we must therefore say that a body acts for as much as it is in act, on a body for as much as it is in potentiality. So we know that nothing acts on its own. Something has to move something, but a material body is in potentiality for movement and action, right? Number 2, whether there are any seminal virtues in corporeal matter. Now, this is a little bit confusing to me because we think of seminal as being like, semen. Virtues, of course, we know what this means. And, he starts off by saying it is customary to name things after what is more perfect, as Aristotle says. Now, in the whole corporeal nature, living bodies are the most perfect. Okay, things that are living, things that are moving are much more important than things that don't have life. But there's an interesting paragraph at the end of this corpus that I think is very significant in the overall picture of what St. Thomas Aquinas is getting at in the Summa. And he says, these active and passive virtues may be considered in several orders. For in the first place, as Augustine says, they are principally and originally in the Word of God as typal ideas. Okay, so you think about in the mind of God, there are typal ideas of all things. Okay, this is the most universal of all things. Secondly, they are in the elements of the world where they were produced all together at the beginning in the universal causes. Okay, so you have God, then you have the universal causes, which is the big picture of things, right? Thirdly, they're in those things which, in the succession of time, are produced by universal causes, for instance, in this plant and in that animal, and in particular causes, okay, individual things. Fourthly, they are in the seeds produced from the animals and plants, and these again are compared to further particular effects as the primordial universal causes are to the first effects produced. Now, that may or may not have made much sense to you, but I'll tell you that in my study of philosophy, my study of St. Thomas Aquinas, I think this paragraph is very important because it plays into the whole idea of nominalism, William of Ockham, the denial of universals. And if you knock out universals, you've knocked out the whole structure of metaphysics as St. Thomas Aquinas put together in the Summa Theologia. So while I may not be able to explain this perfectly, I know it's important, and we're going to keep coming back to this as we continue through the Summa. Whether the heavenly bodies are the cause of what is produced in the bodies here below. Okay, heavenly bodies, planets, moon, sun, that kind of thing. Since every multitude proceeds from unity, and since what is immovable is always in the same way of being, whereas what is moved has many ways of being, it must be observed that throughout the whole of nature, all movement proceeds from the immovable. Therefore, the most immovable certain things are, the more they are the cause of those things which are most movable. Now, the heavenly bodies are of all bodies the most immovable, for they are not moved save locally. Now, this, again, I don't know if this is just bad science and St. Thomas Aquinas doesn't realize that these things are moving around, or if he thought they were stationary in space, or if there was some kind of different movement that the heavenly bodies had that was different from the movement here below. I really don't know. Therefore, the movements of the bodies here below, which are various and multiform, must be referred to the movement of the heavenly bodies as to their cause. So he's saying that the heavenly bodies, whether it be corporeal things like the planets or incorporeal things like the angels, are having an impact on what's here below. Okay, we know that. We know the tides. We know things happen because of moon cycles, and certainly because of the sun. I mean, my goodness. But I don't know how antiquated this was or not. Whether the heavenly bodies are the cause of human actions. All right, the heavenly bodies can directly and of themselves act on bodies. They can act directly indeed on those powers of the soul, which are the act of corporeal organs, but accidentally, because the acts of such powers must need be hindered by the obstacles in the organs. Thus an eye, when disturbed, cannot see very well. Wherefore, if the intellect and will were powers affixed to corporeal organs, as some maintained, holding that intellect does not differ from sense, it would follow of necessity that the heavenly bodies are the cause of human choice and action. All right, so basically what he's saying here is, yeah, the heavenly bodies can impact corporeal things, bodies. We have bodies. It can impact us, but not to the degree that it affects our intellect or our will, because as Thomas Aquinas has clearly stated many times, our intellect, our will are not connected to corporeal organs. They're separate. They're subsistent, right? And that's what he's getting at here. Whether heavenly bodies can act on the demons. There have been three opinions about the demons. In the first place, the Pre-Socratics denied the existence of demons and held that what is ascribed to the demons is affected by the power of the heavenly bodies. So the Pre-Socratics, that would be Aristotle's school, denied the demons. But Thomas says this opinion is manifestly false, for we know by experience that many things are done by demons. Okay, so Thomas, he ain't having that one. All right, and then he goes on and says, for this reason, the Platonists were led to hold that demons are animals with an aerial body and a passive soul. Isn't it interesting to see what these ancients believed? Demons are subject to heavenly bodies in the same way as we have said man is subject thereto. But this opinion is proved to be false from what we have said above, for we hold that demons are spiritual substances not united to bodies. Hence it is clear that they are subject to the action of heavenly bodies, neither essentially nor accidentally, neither directly nor indirectly. All right, remember, the heavenly bodies have an impact on corporeal bodies, things that have materiality, but not things that are spiritual, not things that are subsistent, and the demons clearly are subsistent. All right, finally, whether heavenly bodies impose necessity on things subject to their actions. I'm just going to read 2 quick paragraphs here. The question is partly solved by what we have said and partly presents some difficulty. For it was shown that although the action of heavenly bodies produce certain inclinations in corporeal nature, the will, nevertheless, does not of necessity follow these inclinations, okay, as we've already explained. Therefore, there is nothing to prevent the effect of heavenly bodies being hindered by the actions of the will, not only in man himself, but also in other things to which human action extends. But in natural things, there is no such principle, endowed with freedom to follow or not to follow the impressions produced by heavenly agents. Wherefore, it seems that in such things at least, everything happens of necessity. Birds build nests, beavers build dams, salmon swim upstream, according to the reasoning of some of the ancients, who, supposing that everything that is has a cause, and that, given the cause, the effect follows of necessity, concluding that all things happen of necessity. All right, so Thomas seems to be of the opinion that there is some influence. He goes on, but it gets kind of confusing. But he clearly thinks that the heavenly bodies, and certainly the incorporeal spiritual angels, have an influence on what's going on here below, but not to the extent that it can alter man's free will. Okay, did that make sense? I know it's kind of challenging, and doing one of these a day, I can only do so much. I read it, I try to do my best, I try to explain it, but I hope it is of value to you. Thank you for watching. Thank you for commenting and all that other good stuff. And I hope you're enjoying studying the Summa and going through this one question at a time. And we are 15, 16, 17, 18, 4 questions away from the end of Prima Pars. Then we go into Prima Secunda. God bless you. St. Thomas Aquinas, pray for us. Bye-bye.